Right now, someone is watching you, not with their eyes, with their patience. They have studied your patterns, your triggers, your breaking points, and they are waiting for you to feel something. Because the moment you feel something, they own you. And the worst part? You have no idea it is already happening. You think your anger is yours. You think your guilt is yours. You think your fear, your jealousy, your desperate need to be understood. You think all of that belongs to you. It does not. It never did. Someone handed you those emotions like a leash, and you picked it up yourself. You pulled it tight. You called it passion. You called it principle. You called it being real. But what you are actually doing, what you have been doing your entire life, is being predictable. And predictable men get used. Look at your life right now. Think about the last argument you lost, not because you were wrong, but because you could not control what you were feeling long enough to think. Think about the last time someone disrespected you and you reacted, and somehow you ended up looking like the problem. Think about the last time you cared more than the other person, and they used that caring as a weapon against you. This is not bad luck. This is not just who you are. This is a system, and you were never supposed to see it. The people around you, some of them, not all, but some, have learned something that nobody taught you in school, that no father sat you down and explained, that no mentor handed it to you. They learned that a man who cannot govern his own emotions is a man who can be governed by anyone else. And so they poke, they provoke, they guilt, they gaslight, they go cold when you need warmth, and warm when they need something from you. They manufacture situations designed to pull a specific reaction out of you, and then they use that reaction to justify what they already planned to do. You were the experiment, you were the instrument, and you kept playing yourself, wondering why nothing ever changed. But here is the thing. There was a man nearly 2,000 years ago who understood all of this with a clarity so sharp it still cuts. He was not a rebel. He was not a criminal. He was not some underground philosopher whispering dangerous truths in the dark. He was the most powerful man on earth, the Emperor of Rome, a man who commanded legions, who decided the fate of nations, who held more power in one hand than most men dream of in a lifetime. And yet, and this is what matters, he was constantly at war, not with his enemies, with himself, with his own mind, with the emotional machinery inside him that, if left unchecked, would have made him just as manipulatable, just as predictable, just as controllable as any slave in the empire. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and in the private journals he never intended for anyone to read, he wrote this: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Read that again. Not power over other people, not power over circumstances, power over your mind. Because he understood, truly understood, that the man who masters his own inner world becomes impossible to touch, and the man who does not becomes a puppet for whoever is patient enough to learn his strings. What I am about to share with you is not motivation. This is not a feel-good lecture about believing in yourself. This is intelligence, emotional intelligence weaponized for your protection. This knowledge is for protection, not destruction. Every principle here is something Marcus lived, tested, and refined under conditions most men today cannot even imagine. So pay attention, because what you are about to learn, they do not want you to know. The first thing you need to understand is this: your emotions are not you. Say that again in your head. Your emotions are not you. Most men walk around completely fused with whatever they happen to be feeling at any given moment. They feel anger and they become angry. They feel fear and they become afraid. They feel disrespected and they become a man demanding respect, which, ironically, is the single fastest way to lose it. Marcus Aurelius called this the discipline of perception, the ability to create space, even the smallest gap between what happens to you and how you respond to it. Not suppression, not fakeness, space. And in that space lives your power. Think about the last time someone said something to deliberately get under your skin. A comment designed to make you defensive, a slight calculated to make you react. The moment you reacted, you handed them control. Not because your feelings were wrong. Your feelings might have been completely justified, but because your reaction was predictable. They knew exactly what button to press, and they pressed it, and you performed exactly on cue. Now, think about what would have happened if you had simply paused. One breath, 1 second of stillness. What if you had looked at them with calm eyes and said nothing, or said something measured, something they didn't expect? The entire dynamic shifts. Now they don't know what you're thinking. Now they're the one who is off balance. That pause, that single moment of emotional sovereignty is the most powerful move you can make in any room. The practical action is brutally simple. For the next 30 days, every time you feel a strong emotional pull in a social situation, anger, defensiveness, the urge to justify yourself, pause for 3 seconds before you respond. Not 3 minutes, 3 seconds. That's enough. Train that pause like a muscle, because it is a muscle. And right now, yours is atrophied from years of immediate reaction. Drop this in the comments. I am not my emotions. I am the one who decides what to do with them. The second principle Marcus lived by is this: most people's opinions of you are a trap. And I don't mean that in the dismissive self-help way of just stop caring what people think. I mean it in the structural, strategic sense. When you are emotionally invested in how others perceive you, you have given them enormous leverage over your behavior. They can make you work harder by withholding approval. They can make you back down by threatening social rejection. They can make you do things you would never choose freely by making you feel like your status depends on their validation. This is not a theory. This is the operating mechanism of almost every manipulative relationship, every toxic workplace, every social hierarchy built on insecurity. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and still wrote in his private journals about the temptation to seek praise, to be liked, to be admired. He called it a poison, not because ambition is wrong, but because when your self-worth becomes dependent on external approval, you have essentially handed the keys to your psychology to whoever is willing to dangle validation in front of you. The man who needs your approval has no real power. The man who doesn't need it, who genuinely, structurally doesn't need it, becomes someone others instinctively want to impress. Here's what this looks like in the real world. You're in a group of men. Someone makes a joke at your expense. Everyone laughs. The old you scrambles, either to laugh along and perform security you don't feel, or to clap back and look defensive. The new you does neither. You simply hold eye contact, allow a small knowing smile, and say nothing.
or say something completely unrelated, something that signals your mind wasn't even shaken enough to address it. Because a man who cannot be rattled by social pressure is a man people unconsciously begin to orbit. They don't fully understand why, but you will. The practical action: identify one person in your life whose opinion you have been treating like oxygen. Not someone you love and respect, someone whose approval has been controlling your decisions. And this week, make one choice that person wouldn't approve of, consciously and deliberately. Not to hurt them, to remind yourself that you can. The third thing Marcus Aurelius understood, and this one will sting, is that your need to explain yourself is one of the greatest vulnerabilities you carry. When someone accuses you of something, your first instinct is to
In your life, this principle has immediate application. Stop announcing your plans. Stop broadcasting your pain. Stop performing your healing on social media. Stop telling people who have not earned trust about your ambitions, your fears, your relationships, your financial situation. Not because vulnerability is wrong. Deep, chosen vulnerability with trusted people is one of the most human things there is, but because indiscriminate openness in a world that contains people who will use information against you is not vulnerability. It is naivety wearing vulnerability's face. Drop this in the comments. My silence is not absence, it is strategy. Practical action. Identify one thing you have been sharing too widely, a plan, a struggle, a goal, and go quiet about it for 30 days. Tell no one. Work in silence. Then observe how differently you feel when the victory, if it comes, belongs entirely to you. The seventh and final principle is perhaps the most dangerous idea Marcus Aurelius ever committed to paper, and it is this: the ultimate power is the power to be nobody's slave, not financially, not socially, not emotionally. He called it the inner citadel, the indestructible fortress inside every man that external forces cannot breach, that time cannot erode, that other people cannot colonize unless he opens the gates himself. And most men open the gates willingly, with their reactions, with their need for approval, with their unexamined emotions, with their desperation to be seen, validated, loved on someone else's terms. Here is the dark truth that sits underneath everything we have talked about today. The world is not designed for your liberation. It is designed for your participation. Participation in systems that require you to be reactive, to be predictable, to be emotionally available in ways that can be exploited, to measure your worth through metrics that keep you forever inadequate, forever hungry, forever controllable. The algorithm wants your outrage. The corporation wants your insecurity. The toxic person in your life wants your guilt. They all want the same thing: access to your interior. And Marcus Aurelius, 2,000 years before any of this existed, already had the answer. You guard the interior. You govern the interior. You become so sovereign in your own inner world that nothing outside it can claim you. Drop this in the comments. They built a system designed for my compliance. I am building a mind designed for my sovereignty. We are reaching the moment now where something has to be said clearly, because if you have stayed this long, if this has been landing somewhere real inside you, then something has already shifted. You cannot unhear what you have heard. You cannot unsee what you have seen about the patterns in your own life, in the people around you, in the emotional mechanisms that have been running quietly in the background of every relationship friendship, every argument, every moment where you walked away feeling like you had somehow lost without even knowing the rules of the game. The old you is dead. That version of you who picked up the leash without knowing it was a leash, who reacted before he thought, who explained himself to people who had already made up their minds, who gave his emotional center away to anyone who asked firmly enough. That man is gone now, not because I said so, but because the moment you name a pattern, you can no longer pretend you do not see it. And a man who sees clearly cannot go back to performing blindness. You are a weapon, pointed at your own future, not at your enemies, not at the people who have wronged you, not at the world that was not built in your favor, at your future. Every principle you have absorbed today, every pause you will learn to take, every piece of strategic silence, every moment you choose your response instead of surrendering to your reaction, that is a bullet aimed at exactly the life you are supposed to be building. The focus is inward first, always inward first, because a man who has conquered himself has already won the most important war there is. You belong to no one, not to their expectations, not to their narratives about who you are, not to the version of you that was convenient for them to have around, not to your past, not to your pain, not to the emotional patterns you inherited and never chose. You belong to no one, and that is not loneliness, that is sovereignty. That is the beginning of something most men never find because they never stopped long enough to realize they were living inside someone else's script. Marcus Aurelius died as the last of the 5 good emperors. He died having governed the most powerful civilization the ancient world had ever known, and on his deathbed, by most accounts, he was at peace. Not because his life had been easy, it had been brutal. Plague, war, betrayal, the grief of a son who would become history's cruelest emperor. He was at peace because he had won the only war that ultimately matters, the one inside, the one none of his enemies could ever truly reach. That peace is available to you, not as a destination, as a practice, daily, imperfect, demanding, and completely, irreversibly worth it. If what you heard today carved something open in you, if it lit something, or perhaps more accurately, cleared away something that was blocking the light, then do not leave this channel yet. What I am building here is not a content library, it is a curriculum, a slow, deliberate education in the kind of psychological intelligence that used to be passed down in secret, held by philosophers and generals and kings who understood that this knowledge, in the hands of ordinary men who refuse to remain ordinary, changes everything. Subscribe if you choose to, not for me, for the version of you that is already forming on the other side of everything you learned today. And before you leave, I want you to sit with one question, not answer it publicly if you do not want to, but sit with it honestly, because honest discomfort is where real change lives. The question is this: if you removed every emotional reaction from the last year of your life, every outburst, every defense, every moment you chased validation, every time you let guilt make a decision for you, how different would your life actually look right now?